Welcome back to Immigration Ain't Easy. I am Mo Goldman, and I am joined by two wonderful guests. One of them is Amy Maldonado, who is an immigration attorney based out of East Lansing, Michigan. Is that where Michigan State University is?
It is, yeah. People ask me why I'm here, and I say, why is anybody here? My husband's a professor at Michigan State.
And Amy is one of our favorite, I would say, subspecialists in sports immigration. And I'll ask you a little bit about that in a few minutes, specifically baseball. And so I'm interested in finding out, and I think the listeners will like to know how you fell into the niche of being an expert on baseball players' visas, green cards, and maybe you'll have an interesting story or two about that. Also with us is Babak, and I hope I get this straight. It's Akhlaghi.
Yes.
Correct? Good.
Yes,
I got that right. Babak Akhlaghi, who is a patent attorney. He's a director at Novatech patent firm based out of Washington, D.C. He also is the co-author of Patent Applications Handbook, which has been published by the West Publications since 1992. Wow. And your practice is specifically focused on patent preparation and prosecution. And actually, the focus of our discussion when we get into Babak is about his brother, Kaveh, and the struggles that Amy and Babak have faced in trying to get Kaveh here, who's a design professional in architecture and has an interesting specialization that we'll talk about. And so thank you both for joining me.
Thanks, Mo.
Thank you, Mo. Thanks for having me.
All right. No problem. So let me kick this off by asking you, Amy, some questions because I'm curious about your background. When did you start practicing in immigration law exclusively?
So I graduated from law school in 98 from Penn, brand ruined, but we won't go there. And I knew I wanted to be an immigration attorney because I went to law school to be a civil rights attorney. And my 1L summer, I was a legislative policy analysis intern at MALDEF in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 1996. And I was like, okay, IRA, and Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer, and immigrants have no rights. So I want to do immigration law. And my immigration law professor, Fernando Chang Mui, who I love and keep in touch with today, he said, oh, you want to do policy? And I said, no, I want to do direct services. And he was like, oh, after you lose cases for a few years, you'll want to move to policy. And it turns out that is not true. I never wanted to move to policy. I still love representing my clients. So that's pretty much why I became an immigration attorney. When I graduated from Penn, we had a public service requirement. You had to volunteer 35 hours per year, second year and third year. And I volunteered 20 hours a week at Catholic Social Services doing asylum cases, second year and third year. So I got offered a job by Sister Cecilia Chen, who I love, of the Order of the Esclavos del Sagrado Corazón de Jesus, who is now in Miami. She's still going. And she remembered me because I actually connected with her a couple of years ago. And she was like, you were the one that came every week. And I was like, yes, that was me. But she offered me a job that paid less than Whole Foods. And so I was like, I owe the University of Pennsylvania a lot of money. And therefore, I took a job in Chicago with what is now Saul Ewing, Arnstein and Lear, because they offered me a position doing litigation 75% and immigration 25%, but getting paid as a litigator. And I was like, hey, this sounds like a deal. So I go there, and I really started full time after we took the bar. So we started in like August of 1998. And then in January of 1998, the partner with all the immigration business left to form VisaNow.com, which is now EnvoyGlobal.com, which was a pioneer of online immigration services. And, for me, the ink was not dry on my law license, and I was like, do I want to join a .com in 1999? I don't think so.
It's about to bust.
Yeah.
The
So
bubble.
I got stuck as a litigator for about 2.5 years. And then I was like, if I don't bite the bullet, I'm going to be, stuck doing this forever and hate my life. And so I took a 50% pay cut to go and work for an immigration lawyer, Robert Perkins in Chicago, who now goes by immigration, I think he's immigration professor. So he and I are also still in touch. He's now in California. And I worked for him for a year. And then I moved to Houston when I had my older daughter, who's now 23, to be closer to my family. And I worked for a law firm in Houston for a year. And then that law firm gave me the confidence to hang out my own shingle because they were a little bit wacky. And so I was like,
we won't mention that one.
Yes. If you can run a law firm, I can totally do this. So I opened my own practice in 2003, and here I am today.
So a lot of immigration lawyers I've spoke to talk about their own family's immigrant story and past. Is there anything in your family's past that had some inspiration to you to go into this? And if so, do you have a strong connection with your family's, I'm assuming, immigrant story?
Yes and no. So my great grandparents are from Mexico, and then when I was in undergrad at the University of Houston, I majored in philosophy with a minor in Mexican American studies. And I took a Latinos in the Law class with a judge who actually wrote me, Judge Guadalupe. What was his last name? I can't remember his last name. He was great. But he wrote one of my recommendation letters to law school. And what I found out in that class was as I was growing up as a kid, my grandpa was in this thing called the American GI Forum because he was a veteran of World War II. So was my great uncle Carmen Maldonado. And to me, it was, this group of little old Mexican men with funny hats, because they're all veterans. So they have the little hats that are red and blue with all the stuff on it. And they were always throwing like dances to raise money for scholarships. And my grandma was always having drama with whoever the chairman's wife was. So it was just this background thing in my childhood that was there. And I didn't know I just thought, it's a little veterans club. So I go to my Latinos in the Law class and I find out that the American GI Forum is one of the seminal civil rights organizations for Mexican Americans in the US, which I did not know. And my grandpa had actually come back from World War II. He was super smart and he taught himself he taught himself some higher math and ended up working for the FAA as a radar repair person. And then apparently in the 70s, he filed complaints against the government for not promoting him over, newer, lighter skinned people. And he ended up as an FAA supervisor in Oklahoma City until he retired. And so I was like, my grandparents did civil rights stuff. Like, who knew? That's so cool. And that was really inspiring to me. And then, as I said, I went to law school to be a civil rights attorney and took a, where civil rights go to die, left turned into immigration law. And one of the things that happened to me is my grandfather and my uncle Carmen had a sister, Juanita Maldonado, which was almost my name, but it did not end up being my name. Thank goodness. So I go back, and for some reason, I can't remember what we're doing, but we were at some kind of event, and she was sitting next to me, and she was like, "Oh, what kind of law do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be an immigration attorney." And my Aunt Juanita said to me, my Tia Juanita goes, "Oh, that's good. There are a lot of mojados here." And I'm like, that is a slur.
Yeah, that's not good.
That is not good. So, and that's actually something we're seeing today is a lot of Latinos who have been here, not even for, third, fourth generation like my family, but, the Ted Cruz's, the, various people who come in on Cuban adjustment and then all of a sudden turn around and
back
close the door to everybody else. And so a lot of Latinos don't see themselves as immigrants if they were born here. But I also learned in my Latinos in the Law class about the 1930s Operation Deportation, the 1950s Operation Wetback. That is the English translation of the slur that my great aunt just threw out there. And that was an official government name of an action where, I think in Operation Deportation in the 30s, a quarter of the people that were rounded up and shoved across the border to Mexico were actually U.S. born U.S. citizens. So we're seeing, a resurgence of that kind of bias and hatefulness today.
Time, I mean, history repeats itself, unfortunately.
For me, it was really the injustice and not that I personally, feel connected to being an immigrant because in my Chicano studies, we also focused on like the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and how the southwestern United States, where I lived, was born and raised, was Mexico until the US picked a fight with Mexico so that they could annex a bunch of territory, which is now the southwestern US. And it's ironic because Mexico allowed Anglo settlers in their territory before that happened who demanded things like bilingual education, things that the US doesn't want to give today. Were demanded in the 1800s before that happened. And so I remember as a student, we would say, like, we didn't cross the border moved over us. That's kind of how I feel.
Well, I will tell you that as an immigration lawyer, I often fanboy over other immigration lawyers, which is really nerdy and creepy. But I'll be like reading articles and I'll see one of my colleagues' names in the article and I'll be like, oh my God, I know that person. And we're seeing that right now a lot because of immigration being on the forefront of the news and what's happening. And a lot of our colleagues are working on these major cases, especially with like the students who are having their visas revoked. The one time where I first did that with you, Amy, and I will never forget it because I do fantasy baseball, and my player was your client, and I found out about it because it was on the Major League Baseball app, and I was reading the article about Jung Ho Kang. And she rolls her eyes. The reaction. So
I did not roll my eyes. I will.
Yeah,
Not
well, no, she just so Jung Ho Kang was on my fantasy baseball team, and I don't know if you know Babak, but losers like myself play fantasy baseball as a diversion from reality, and we manage our own baseball teams, fake baseball teams, but with real players. And it's just a fun thing that we do with our friends, and everyone has a team. And he was on my team. I think he was like a third baseman. And he got a DUI in South Korea, and he had a couple of other criminal incidents. And I remember reading the article about it because he couldn't get his visa. He was having trouble getting his visa to come back here. And that was frustrating me because of my fantasy baseball team. I was personally angry at this guy because I needed him back in the United States to hit baseballs. That's how selfish I am. And in the article, I saw the name. This was in 2018. I see that his representative or the Pirates representative is Amy Maldonado. And I was like, whoa, I'm like, I know that person. And it was almost like you're an instant celebrity in my eyes. All right. So that brings to the question of how did you wind up representing Major League Baseball teams and getting involved in that?
I actually love this story because it's so random. So I was born and raised in Oklahoma because my grandpa was reassigned to the FAA in Oklahoma City. So he worked at Will Rogers Airport. So our little branch of our Mexican family moved away from Fort Worth, Texas, and was in Oklahoma City. So my dad, because I am very old, I am AARP age this year, 55. My dad was in the construction business. He was an estimator at a construction company, and he actually went from being a timekeeper to a vice president of estimation. And then there was the oil bust in the 80s. So construction was not in a good place. My dad took a job in Houston with Manhattan Construction Company. And then my mom and I followed him a year later. And when we moved to Houston, I was 16, and my mom found us a dentist. And her name was Dr. Elizabeth O'Sullivan Winslow. I love her to pieces. She's retired now. Best dentist I ever had, hands down. And she knew me when I was like, embarrassingly, it was hard to be gothy in Houston because wearing head to toe black in like 100-degree weather and 100% humidity Not fun, I discovered. So I met her when I had like purple hair and I was a little rebel and all that good stuff. And basically, um, I kept going to her as I went to college, like I said, in at the University of Houston, and then I went to law school at Philadelphia, and I practiced in Chicago. Never found a better dentist. Would always come back to see her when I was visiting my parents in Houston. So I moved back, and I'm establishing my practice. And at this point, she feels like part of my family because by the time I'm back in Houston, I'm like 31, 32. And she was the dentist for a bunch of the Houston Astros, including the bullpen catcher, who I love to this day. He's like my brother, Javier Bracamonte. He's been the bullpen catcher since I met him in like 2004 until now. And he was getting married, and she said, I'm going to hire you to do his marriage based case as a gift. Because obviously he was on a P1S, back in the day, he was a coach as the bullpen catcher. And so she hired me to do his family based case. And she said, do a good job and you'll get a bunch of baseball player clients. And I was like, well, I would do a good job anyway, but okay. So I did his case. We got him his residency, got him his citizenship. He introduced me to a couple of Venezuelan sports agents who were in the middle of a perm labor certification process being done by an attorney that you and I both know in Chicago. And he had told them that they didn't qualify for work visas. So they were basically traveling in and out to visit clients in the United States on B1, B2s. And I was just like, that's not good. And also, you can do an O1 because as I am today, I am a O1 visa attorney. I do a lot of
And
O1.
just to confirm for the listener, the O1 visa is for someone with an extraordinary ability in a specific field. Like there's two subsections of it, which we'll talk about in a little bit more regarding Kaveh.
So this was an O1A for an alien of extraordinary ability in business. And I looked at their case and I said, hey, you guys aren't Scott Boras, but you're definitely the top baseball players or baseball agents out of Venezuela because a lot of their clients were high in MLB at that time. So I got them both O1A visas. They thought I was the most amazing attorney of all time. They started having me work with their clients. I started working with the sports agency. Their sports agency got bought by Octagon. The players start changing agents and getting traded around. And I start working with a lawyer, Bob Hill, who represented 8 MLB teams for about 20 years. I worked with him from, I want to say like 2006 or 7 on until he retired a few years ago. And then I had, met different people at various clubs, the leadership at clubs, people high up on the teams. And so when Bob retired, he recommended 3 attorneys to his clients to take over his cases. And I picked up half of them. So I have 4 Major League Baseball teams that came from Bob. I just picked up a 5th Major League Baseball team, and I just did a consultation for the first time with a 6th one. So I'm hoping if I get to 6 teams, I'll represent 20% of all MLB clubs. That's my goal.
That's amazing. Interesting side note. One of the people I've interviewed on this podcast is the Spanish radio broadcaster for the Houston Astros, Francisco Romero.
Oh, he definitely knows Javier. Everybody knows Javier.
Everyone does. Yeah, and Francisco is just an amazing person. He actually immigrated through my mother's assistance, and he's been working with the Astros for several years now, even has a World Series ring, which I got to put on. Those rings are enormous. Before I get to you, Babak, I'd be remiss to not mention that Amy was selected in 2021 by the Hispanic National Bar Association as the Pro Bono Attorney of the Year. And so it really speaks to your heart, your willingness to do cases without, looking for remuneration to do that. And I think a lot of immigration lawyers do a significant amount, a lot more pro bono work than the majority. It's just kind of, is part and parcel of what we do, but you should be commended for that.
Thank you. My husband was not super happy with me because during the first Trump administration, I was really outraged
And you
by
weren't making any money.
working. He's an economist at MSU. He's an ag economist. And he was just like, we cannot afford for you to do like 70% of your work for free. And I was like, it's a pandemic. I'm sitting at home in my pajamas, like suing the government. It's fine. So, but it was really, I had been honestly outraged under the Obama administration by the detention of asylum seeking families and children. And so I had been supporting Bridget Cambria at Aldea in Pennsylvania as she tried to close down Berks, which was one of the 3 family detention centers in the US. Those are all probably getting filled up again now, after Berks had been shuttered under Biden and it became a women's ICE detention facility. But, Trump came into office and we saw the pilot family separation a year before family separation went into full effect. And that was super frustrating because we could see it coming down the pike. And so what we did was we filed individual lawsuits on behalf of detained children under the Flores settlement agreement, which did not conflict with Ms. L because Ms. L was a class action on behalf of the parents who were being separated. And so we argued that basically the family separation policy violated Flores. And we were pretty successful in terms of getting family members reunified and, released and all that good stuff. So I worked on a bunch of cases. And then my one case that I'm super proud of, which I had nothing to do with the Third Circuit decision on the Flores settlement agreement, was the Third Circuit case about our 6-year-old client who was an MPP with her father, and they gave up on their asylum claim because the conditions were so dangerous and he was so worried. So in order to deport him, they had to bring him to Berks, which was the only family detention center that allowed fathers to be detained with daughters. And when he met with a lawyer for the first time with Bridget. And so she talked to him, and in order to relinquish your asylum claim, it has to be voluntary. And so Bridget was like, this was not voluntary. It was coerced by the circumstances in MPP. So the government said, great, file whatever you want and we'll send them back to Mexico. So we filed, I wrote the worst complaint I've ever written in my entire life. In under 3.5 hours, I failed to cite the mandamus statute in a mandamus case, among other things. Like, it was bad, but we got a temporary order. We got a temporary agreement with the government, and they agreed they were going to flew them across the country in the middle of the night. They were going to push them over the border in Tijuana at midnight, a dad and a 6-year-old child on foot. And instead they kept them there for a few days. They brought them back. The government agreed to keep them in the United States as long as the case was, through the litigation of the case. So we end up winning at the Third Circuit, and the government tells us they're going to send them back to Mexico now because their case is no longer ongoing. We got an emergency order from the Third Circuit saying, no, don't do that. But they basically found that there was jurisdiction for children to challenge their detention and conditions of their detention under Flores in federal district court.
Well, you should be commended. And let's get away from immigration for a minute and talk about a little patent law. This is actually the first time I've had two lawyers I've actually had other two lawyers in completely different areas of law that, have kind of a crossover with what we're going to talk about. But Babak, you came here, you immigrated to the United States yourself, and you got your degree in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland, and then went on to, it's the University of Houston, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of Houston connections in this discussion for your law degree. What was the story about how you came here? And then ultimately, how did you wind up deciding to go to law school after getting your electrical engineering degree?
Thanks, Mo. Thanks for having me. Amy, I didn't know we have something in common. We've both lived in Houston. And I have to say, Houston grew on me. First, when I entered Houston, it was midsummer. And it was like, wear glasses. I can't see for the life.
Fogged up.
Just immediately, as soon as I got out of airplane, I felt like I needed windshield or something. But Houston is a wonderful city. I loved it. I loved the University of Houston. I I grew up in a family, both parents are lawyers, so you can imagine the discussion at the dinner table normally involved their cases, and I found them just super, super interesting. I would always ask questions. I was naturally attracted to it. So when I came to United States, now this is January 11th, 1997, I went to University of Maryland, and I kind of knew I wanted to go to law school, and I went to a pre-law advisor, and she told me that one of the traditional pre-law majors is English literature, and she recommended that I should probably major in English literature because I didn't speak in English at the time. So she's like, you're not going to be able to compete with these law students. So that was the rationale. So I majored in English literature first, but Shakespeare and I couldn't see eye to eye, let's just say.
Yes.
I did not understand.
A lot of people, I don't see eye to eye with Shakespeare either. Okay, so we have something in common there.
I soon realized I'm not going to graduate college, much less go to law school. So I went back to the same advisor and I said, hey, I can't do this. This is too hard for me. And then she said, well, what are you good at? I said, I'm good at math. I'm good at physics. She's like, well, there is this major called patent law. You could major in that if you go to law school with engineering background. So she recommended I major in engineering. And I said, okay, engineering sounds fine. And at the time, this is 1997, 1998, I asked, well, there are so many fields in engineering, which one? And then somebody said electrical engineering is the hottest one, so major in that. So I switched from English literature to electrical engineering. Surprisingly, it was much easier for me than English literature. I graduated top of my class. I had no idea what really patent law is at that point, keep in mind. Went to law school, University of Houston Law Center, right? And great school. And they took a chance on me. And I was one of the two electrical engineers in the entire 400 students in my entering class. It was a big class that year. And so it wasn't hard for me, as you can imagine, finding a job when coming out of law school. There were huge demands for patent attorneys with electrical engineering background. So I still graduated the top 15% of my class and went on to work for a local firm it's a national firm, but they have a big presence in DC. Fish and Richardson is probably number one IP litigation firm. And I was there for a few years. I learned the ropes of patent prosecution. And then I went to the international firm of McDermott, Will and Emery. I was there for a number of years. I became partner there. I was there a few years as a partner, and then I started my own firm. And this is now in 2015. We are coming up with a 10-year anniversary here.
And at your firm, how many you have other lawyers that work there?
We do. We are a total of 15 employees, 10 attorneys, 10 patent practitioners. Most of our background is either computer science or electrical engineering. So we represent some of the biggest companies in the world, but also many exciting startups. And just to relate this to baseball, we work with a startup representing that came up with this revolutionary, I want to say, design product that tackles signal stealing. You guys know, well, I didn't know anything about signal stealing before this. So I know all about signal stealing. And I'm happy to say a lot of major baseball league players are now using this technology. So
wow.
Yeah.
So stealing signs from the pitcher and catcher is what you're referring to, where
Exactly.
when a pitcher's throwing a fastball, the catcher they've changed that now. They modified it, and it's all very like you were saying, it's digital, because it used to be the catcher would just put down like one finger, two fingers, and then the guys on base would look at it and they'd give some sort of signal to another player. And wow, so that's amazing.
Yeah. I love working with startups because you get to see how they use the patent to grow and to fund their business. Another startup clients that we work with, it's in a healthcare space, and I was just looking how much money they have raised. They have raised over 100 million. We built their entire patent portfolio from ground up. So I enjoy what I do. As a patent attorney, I like to say we get to see the future first. We get to be involved with the inventors, write the patent application, fight with the patent office to get them allowed. So it's a very and suits my background very well, electrical engineering. So I get to stay in touch with the technology, and
look at that. I mean, you were the founding member of the patent firm, correct?
That's correct.
And so, Amy, when we look at this and we think about, what benefits do immigrants bring to the United States? Here is a prime example of somebody who came to the United States, didn't speak English, or didn't speak it well, didn't, understand Shakespeare, and has now created multiple jobs for people in this country, is, helping to, create new business and industry and ideas through the work you're doing, which is generating hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. I mean, that, it's a amazing story that one person can come here and do something like that. Not to make your head get too big, Babak.
No. No.
So
my wife reminds me of that every day.
I think it's amazing because I am learning things about Babak that I didn't know. So we both went to U of H, had no idea. Because all our conversations have been focused on the case. Like, we really haven't just sat down and chatted. I also have a healthcare specialization. I represent a bunch of healthcare technology companies. I represent a health technology builder kind of company in New York. The general counsel is a classmate of mine from Penn that just a couple of years ago raised like $250 million to spin off 50 healthcare technology companies. It's just so funny that we have so much in common.
A lot of connections.
Yeah.
So let me ask you then, your brother, his name is Kaveh. He's Iranian, correct? As are you. And why don't you give a little background, Babak, about what his specialization is in and what he has become renowned for?
Kaveh, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my father first before I tell you a little bit about Kaveh, so you can understand him. I still cannot grasp his level of intelligence. My dad was extraordinary in the field of international trade law. He was named the father of international trade in Iran, well recognized, recently passed away. I'm not shy to admit I'm smart. I graduated top of my class in electrical engineering, and that's not easy to do. But Kaveh is not just a smart, he is genius and smart. And they are distinct. These two are distinct. He's extraordinary. His background is in architecture, and his specialty is in sports architecture. He got his master's degree in design and architecture from the Azad University in Dubai, and his civil engineering degree from Azad University in Tehran. And then he went on in 2007. When in Iran, nobody was talking about fitness. Everybody was talking about bodybuilding. like how to get big. Kaveh is like there is an area that we need to focus on, and that's fitness. And he started the first fitness club in Iran that not just tailored to men, but to women. And you have, if you understand, I mean, for our audience, whoever is listening, if you understand Iran, this is a group that has been for generations underrepresented, right? And so he started, I want to say, the first fitness club, 2007 Pyramid Sports Club. That was just, it was just a huge milestone. It was, its reputation grew significantly. He started a blockchain event. He started another one after that. Then he started a sports fight club, which is another sports health club, both tailored for men and women. He has an extraordinary eye for design in a sports architecture. He won the Man of the Year award. So let me just, I don't want to forget to mention that. He has been mentioned in numerous publications. So he wants to bring that talent here. And he wants to come here as a design professional. And
Let me ask you, and Amy, you about to say something. Amy, as an immigration lawyer, when you look at his background and you assess it based off of your, dozens, decades of experience, not to age you at all, but
27 years in
does this individual meet the basic requirements for extraordinary ability? Because it sure sounds like it.
Absolutely. So Babak is being, I would say, modest about Kaveh's accomplishments. He also designed and built Iran's first world-class ice hockey rink. He has received multiple awards. He was in an encyclopedia of architecture for his design of Fightbox. He has also been featured in magazines. He's just an amazing guy. But the interesting thing about architecture, because normally when we look at extraordinary ability for the non-immigrant or temporary work visa, we're looking at, you've got three subcategories. You have O1A, which is an alien of extraordinary ability in business, athletics, sciences, etc. You've got O1B, which is for aliens of extraordinary ability in the arts. And then you have O1B, motion pictures, television. So they have different criteria. And the interesting thing about architecture, and also interior design, is they're both business and arts. But it's easier in general to qualify for an O1B because in order to show extraordinary ability in the arts, you have to show that you're distinguished in your field, as opposed to O1A, where you have to show essentially that you're in the top few percentage of your field, either nationally, and that means any country, or internationally. And so I looked at this and I'm like, this is a slam dunk O1B. And I think I said that to you, Babak, in the first consultation.
And it's very rare that a lawyer in our field is going to go to that extent unless they're 100% sure of it. And the problem is, even though you feel 100% sure in immigration, it's never 100%. So Go ahead, Amy.
I would say it's never 100%. And now it's like, I tell my clients, the only thing we can predict is that everything is unpredictable chaos right now. That's it. But I looked at this and I'm like, this is a fantastic case. We know from experience that there are a lot of difficulties for nationals of specific countries. Iran is one of them. I would say one of the most difficult countries to get people visas and permanent status from, especially if they're not in the US already. And Russia. Russians are so you will see, for example, denials for Russians and Iranians that you wouldn't see for anybody else with the same criteria. So we prepared what I like to think of as a really excellent case for him. We had, I think the total page number was about 130 pages of petition letter, forms are less than 10 pages, and all the exhibits. And we filed at premium processing and it was approved within a week. I think it was approved in like 3 days. I mean, it was such a good case. We were very excited. We told Babak, And we started working on getting him an appointment to go get a visa because, as everybody probably remembers, even if they weren't a kid in the 1970s like me, we don't have diplomatic relations with Iran. There is no embassy in Tehran anymore. And so he was going to process, I mean, I think we designated Dubai, but he wanted to go to Lisbon. Was it Lisbon?
Vienna.
Oh, Vienna. That's right. So we were going to send him to Vienna instead, just because, and it's a lot because Iranians have difficulty traveling in general. So in order to go to the appointment in Vienna, he had to get a visa to travel to Europe to apply for the visa to travel to the US. And so we were in the process of doing that. And then we noticed that there was an error on the part of USCIS on the approval notice with Kaveh's birth date. It was 10 years off, even though we put it correctly on the form. They put it incorrectly on the approval notice. And so I emailed them to say, can you correct this and issue me a new approval notice? And they said, oh, we've reopened the case. So no. And I was like, why? And they said they reopened it for security check, which that is not uncommon for Iranians. And so then we get to the next part of our story.
Who's going to pick it up? Should we have Babak pick up the next step? Or all right, so Babak, what happens next?
Let me tell you a little bit of story about security check first.
Okay.
Why I was terrified once I heard that word security check. Taking you back to 2013, I'm about to get married, right? And my wife is like, who do you want to be here? I'm like, the only people that are absolutely necessary to be at my weddings are my parents and my brother and my sister. And my parents have had no problem coming in the US, and my brother up to that point have had no problem coming to the US. They have been able to get a visa to come into the US with background check. And usually the background checks usually takes a few weeks, few months, I'm talking about 2013. And Kaveh had come to the US as a visitor a couple of times and has left the US within a few weeks after the visit. So we sent him an invitation, and he went to the embassy for a visa, and he was approved. His girlfriend at the time, she was approved. She immediately got her visa. But Kaveh, being a male, Iranian male, was told, you are approved pending a background check. We're like, okay, this is normal. We are like, this is nothing unusual for Iranian male to go through a background check. And now it's about 6-7 months before the wedding. We're like, this is plenty of time for us to get married in the US, and Kaveh being still here. Months after months pass by, it's getting close to the wedding, still no word. And finally the wedding day arrives, and Kaveh is still in the background check. So my brother could not attend my own wedding. And I can't tell you how difficult that day was for him, how difficult that day was for me. I think he's one of the most important people in my life. Now, the process, this background check process, took 4 years. After 4 years, the embassy sent an email to Kaveh saying, your visa is ready. Please come pick it up. He goes to Dubai to pick up his visa, and he's told, the embassy, the officer says, I'm so sorry we brought you all the way here. There is a travel ban. We cannot issue a visa right now. And that was the Muslim ban. And so he goes back home, and that's the story of a 4-year security check. So when Amy brought up the security check, I was immediately concerned how long this security check is going to take. He has already been cleared multiple times before. So,
and his
Amy,
travel to the U.S. complied with everything, left again.
Never stayed.
How many times do you need to get the same person?
Yeah.
Unreal.
So Amy, you want to say what happened, this security check? Because we waited. We said, let's wait. We waited for a year, I think.
We waited a long time. So we waited about a year, and then I told Babak that I like to sue the government, but I don't sue the State Department because doctrine of consular non-reviewability, like it's not my jam.
Yeah.
And my bud is Josh Goldstein in
Josh.
LA,
Yep.
and Josh, his entire practice is
That's
suing
all he
the
does
government.
is
I love
sue.
it so much.
I know.
Not only that, Josh is single-handedly responsible for why I branched out into squash and have a bunch of squash clients now, but that's a story for another day.
Oh, wait, squash the it's
sport.
like tennis
The racket
or
sport.
something, right? Racket?
Similar to racquetball, but
Oh, it is. Okay.
similar to racquetball, but different. I actually
So,
just was looking at
and a shout out to Josh. He is a
amazing.
very good lawyer when it comes, especially to these visa delay cases and suing on writs of mandamus.
Right. So he sues USCIS for unreasonable delay for the security checks after reopening. And I suspect that they did nothing with that case the whole year it was open. I don't think they did anything. So they go in and they tell the judge, okay, they sent us a notice of reopening. So the government goes and tells the judge in the unreasonable delay case, we've reopened the case. So that takes jurisdiction away from the court, because Josh kind of babysat it for a while. The next thing we know, we get a notice of intent to revoke based on gross error with no mention of security checks. And so we write a response to it that's it was a very aggressive response. Like my Canadian clients would have been very concerned reading the tone we took with the government. And one of the things I pointed out to them is that you cannot revoke a case that's been reopened because there is no decision to revoke. So they need to send us a notice of intent to deny that we then respond to. And at this point, I'm assuming we're getting a denial. So basically, in the first notice of intent to revoke, they say you no longer meet the 3 criteria. Because you have to meet either one major internationally recognized award or 3 of the alternative evidentiary criteria in order to meet the evidentiary threshold for the visa. So at first, approval, no problem. Second, you no longer meet 3 of the criteria, you only meet 2 of them. They send us the notice of intent to deny, and the notice of intent to deny says, your attorney's right, we can't revoke a reopened case. Here's your notice of intent to deny, and now we think you met all 3 criteria, but you're not good enough to be extraordinary. So we wrote a very harsh response, and we basically called them out. We sent them a timeline. Because we were emailing premium processing about this case when they told us it was security checks, we had an email from them saying that they reopened it for security checks. So we're like, it's very clear based on the record in front of us that you're looking for any pretext to deny this case. This guy's completely qualified. Just give us your denial so we can sue you in court. That was the tone of our response. And on Easter weekend, and we were so ready. We were ready to sue. Babak was ready to sue. Like we were all over it.
And what year are we at now?
Oh gosh.
How far along this has been? How many?
I can look up the dates.
Oh, you know what? I think I have the timeline here. Actually,
you don't have the filing to approval timeline.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But it'd been going on for a while.
It had been going on for a long while.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me look. And it's still actually open right now.
And while you're looking that up, what's your brother's feeling on this? Is he just frustrated? Is he sitting there going, okay, well, this is just, having to deal with the government and, not getting frustrated? Like what's his reaction and yours?
I think frustrated would be, I can't describe it. It's extremely difficult to put your life on hold. You are in this status of approved, pending processing. He's an entrepreneur. He has started multiple gyms in Iran. So when you, as an entrepreneur, you need predictability. You need to know where you're going to be. And this process has been a little bit difficult for him to comprehend because he can't plan his life. That
is unbelievably frustrating.
It is.
So what did you find, Amy?
So we initially filed this in November of 2022. It was approved in 3 days. The approval notice was valid from December 1, 2022 to November 30th of 2025. And then where's our next approval notice? There's a reopen. Hold on. And then we got the new approval on. Nope, that's the old approval. Sorry, I label everything approval. So it's going to take me a minute. But basically, it was Easter, I want to say of last year. Was it last year, Babak?
Yes, it was 2024.
2024.
April of 2024, Kaveh went to Vienna for his interview. So this must have been a few months, I want to say, before that.
Yeah. Yeah. So my associate attorney, Adriana, had been working with me on this, doing just an incredible job. She's my little, I tell her she's my little superstar because she interned with me as a law student. She does a phenomenal job and she's very invested in this case. And so we had just, like, because I harass her all the time on the weekends. And so I was like, I'm not calling you this weekend. And I go to my phone and I see a notification that it was approved the weekend, like it was, Easter weekend. Or close to Easter. And I call Adriana at home and she's like, yes, because I just told her I wasn't going to call her. And I was like, God, I got approved. And I called you. It was definitely after hours, but I was so happy because I really thought we were going to have to go slug it out in federal court. And they caved because they were wrong and they were always wrong. And it was incredibly frustrating. And so we got the approval and then Kaveh scheduled his interview in Vienna. And he went to his interview and he got put in administrative processing.
What is administrative processing for anyone that doesn't know that?
Basically, it's another layer of security checks. So that previous security checks that took 4 years for Kaveh, and he ended up not getting the visa because of the Muslim ban. Same security checks. He's back in them. So we actually just filed recently to amend the dates on the approval notice. But one of the issues that we're anticipating is they may give us a hard time about whether or not Kaveh sustained his claim during this time period when he's been waiting to come to the US. So he's not like starting huge new international projects because he's trying to wait for his visa. So we are hopeful that we will get a straight amendment without having to sue them, but we're ready. Babak's ready. We're ready. I mean, we will take them on if they mess with us.
And so now we are 12 years into this saga from 2013 when he got his temporary visitor visa approved, but then got stuck in administrative checks. Yeah. And they're just messing with his life, basically. Yeah. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just, it's such a horrible but good example of how our government mistreats the foreigners that want to come here and benefit our country.
And this administration is particularly bad, and it's being particularly harmful. Like, we're seeing a huge drop in interest to visit the United States, which is going to kill our tourism industry. We're seeing a 40-something% drop in interest in graduate programs in the U.S., which is going to negatively affect universities. But it is important to point out that this has spanned Democratic and Republican administrations.
Oh, yeah. It's been going on.
Trump administration is definitely the worst, but the U.S. government has never been good about any of this. And so it's frustrating to us who practice immigration law that the American public just thinks it's so easy to get a visa and come here. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Babak, when you talk to other people back home, I mean, are they like just discouraged about wanting to come to the United States, or do they still want to try to come here and obtain this, elusive American dream that you have been able to obtain? Like, it's almost like winning the lottery. But, I'm just curious, have you talked to people back home, or have you heard from people who, have gone through this, even your brother? Like, what's the feedback you get?
I haven't talked to the people back home to get their feedback on this. But if I were to speculate, I believe they would still love to come to the U.S.
Sure.
U.S. is still, among most Iranian, U.S. is still a beacon of light, a country of hope, dreams are realized. And I still believe in it. And I still believe in such a country. I think there is there is a difference from having a secure border um, and not allowing illegal immigrants come in, and having a border that allows and promotes legal immigration. And I think everybody agrees on that. I don't think this is a hot issue. Hey, we want to have immigration. We want to have legal immigration. And for people that are trying to do this legally for a long time, and prime example, my brother, is very frustrating. Now, whether you're from Iran or from any other country.
And
we're talking about, when we're talking about an O1B or an O1A, we're talking about the most talented immigrants in the world. This is not just like, run of the mill architect guy. We're talking about the very best of international talent that we're not letting come.
Yeah, and there's no basis in fact to do this. It's all sheer discrimination. At the end of the day, it's a discriminatory policy that we see occur, like you were saying earlier, especially to men from certain countries.
And we're going back to Josh as soon as we get the amended approval dates, because at this point, November 30th.
There's no point in waiting anymore.
But once we get the amended approval dates, we're going back to federal court with Josh on an APA unreasonable delay claim, because it's now been more than a year.
Has this case, Amy, been, of all the cases you've worked on, one of the most biggest of a struggle that you've had to deal with?
Outside of humanitarian cases, I mean, in terms of having highly talented, qualified immigrants, normally USCIS and the State Department, under normal conditions, like when I'm calling them about my MLB players, they work with me. They will sometimes roll out the red carpet for my clients, depending on who they are. One of my favorite national interest waivers of all time is actually a client who just contacted me again a couple days ago about a new case. But she's a U.S. citizen now. But she's a fashion designer from Colombia who put Rihanna in a coconut bikini, and I won a national interest waiver on her case, and I'm super proud of that fact. I mean, it's so funny because I went to law school thinking I was going to be a civil rights attorney, and my favorite cases are for these highly talented individuals coming to
and unique, and also because the laws are so difficult. I mean, we have such stringent rules. You have to try to find a category to try to fit something in that it's kind of like the whole, square peg, round object, scenario where you're like, all right, I've got a fashion designer who created a coconut bikini. How do I make an argument that her work is going to be in the national interest of the United States? Yeah. I mean, think about that. Yeah. That's good legal work.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But to be fair, artistic contributions, which would include the O&B like Kaveh, those are unique. So I always love doing NIWs for artists because their contributions are not fungible. They cannot be replaced by anybody else.
Have you seen your brother in person over the last decade, or do you get to visit with him at, the overseas?
We were supposed to see each other next week in Spain. I saw him a little over a year ago when my dad passed away. I traveled back to Iran. So I normally see him at least once a year. It has to be somewhere in Europe, or I have to go back to Iran to be able to see him. But the plan anyway for next week was postponed to summer, just for some sort of because of some personal conflict reasons.
I have one more question. You work in front of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Do you see the sorts of shenanigans that we see in immigration law, or is it much more straightforward to go through their type of process?
I would say no. I mean, I have the utmost respect for immigration attorney based on what I've seen they go through, and the clients they represents, and their livelihoods is on the line. At the patent office, we are at the end of the day talking about an invention and whether invention is granted or not. doesn't usually have it does have life-changing implication for startups, right? They use it to fund their business, but it, in a sense, it doesn't affect whether they can stay in this country or they can't stay in this country.
They can see
So,
their family every
right.
week.
And as far as the prosecution, because we use the same kind of terminology in patents, patent prosecution is concerned, it can get challenging, right? Sometimes the area of law is not very clear, and we get terrible rejections from examiners. But at the end of the day, we are working with seasoned engineers. Examiners are seasoned, experienced engineers. And we pick up the phone, we talk it through, and we are able to work it out and get the case allowed. So I can say, no, it's nothing like immigration.
I will note it was kind of it's sad but funny all at once. Yesterday, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement put out a picture that said, if it crosses the U.S. border illegally, it's our job to stop it. And one of the things they listed people, money, products, and ideas. And so when we're talking about innovation, it's funny because they put ideas on there, and I'm thinking, what sort of illegal ideas are immigrants bringing to the United States? I mean, obviously people might come with some, criminal ideas, but it's just the way it was worded, like, don't bring your illegal ideas into our country. Anyways, do you have anything else you want to mention, Babak, before we close, or Amy?
I really do feel like we're in the most terrible area of law, and yet I wouldn't do anything else. I really wouldn't. I love being able to help my clients. I mean, even back early in my career, I once got a card from a client when he got his green card approved, and he was like, your work has changed my life. It's changed the course of my life. I'm so grateful. I enjoyed my career before immigration law started getting even worse than it already was, because I was able to help people get citizenship, to help them get residency, to get them visas to come to the US. And I'd get like plates of Middle Eastern pastries. And I got some like nice gold jewelry once from one of my clients in Saudi Arabia. Like, I love what I do, and it's become so difficult. And fun fact, we're the most underpaid cohort of attorneys in the country. Immigration lawyers are the lowest salary earners among attorneys. So we really do it because we love it. It's not for, I think, the vast majority of us. If we wanted to make a lot of money, we'd do something else, like litigate. Yeah. So I really
thank you for what you do.
Yeah. I just hope that our country wakes up to the fact that immigration has kept our economy vibrant. It's made our economy great. We have maintained dominance in areas of like biotechnology, of all kinds of different parts of the world economy, because we have such a great group of people coming to the United States. And by closing that out in fear, we're just hurting ourselves.
Exactly. Any final words, Babak?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you, Amy. She is an amazing attorney. I can't emphasize that point enough. Amy, you're just great. I still remember it was a Friday night at 8 p.m., maybe 8:05 p.m. to be exact, when you called me. I was at the dinner table right here on this table when you called, and I took your call, and you said the visa was approved for the second time, right? For the second time. And what we are talking about, Amy pointed this out, we are talking about approval for extraordinary people. I can put the fact that my brother is aside. We are talking about people that can come here and they can revolutionize whatever industries they are expert in. I know Kaveh can do that here. I know other people with the same talent, extraordinary ability can do that here. This is good for America. So it creates jobs. It helps us to be number one, right? And I hope situation improves where we can promote legal immigration, right? For people that are trying to come here legally.
Exactly. And I think the situation is ultimately it's got to get so bad and bad enough that that improvement will finally take hold in in the future. I mean, I look at immigration, I look at our policies as a pendulum. We go a lot of times from one way all the way to another way, and we look at that in history with a lot of different cultures and governments. And so maybe we're at that point right now where we're just almost at the lowest, and it's going to have to shift back when people start to realize that we need people like Kaveh in this country
to perhaps make America great, as it were.
again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both for joining me. Babak Akhlaghi and Amy Maldonado, thank you for joining me on the Immigration Ain't Easy podcast. Thank you to Emma, my daughter and producer of the podcast. And I just thank you both. I appreciate you both joining me.
Thanks, Mo.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Emma. And Amy, thank you again.